Patriots.
Eat some shit, you stupid bitch. Just kidding.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is episode number 29 of the Baseball and Beer podcast. I am your host. My name is Brendan Bowes, and I hope everyone enjoyed their extra long week with Thanksgiving in there. I hope everyone enjoyed their Thanksgiving meals, if you can remember it at this point. Seems like such a long time ago, but I had a good time. I went down to Connecticut, had some fun with my family, but now it's time to get back on track and talk about those two things that everyone loves, baseball, beer, and kind of sort of football. We do have a lot to catch up on. But before we get into that, you know what time it is. It is time for me to plug my own shit. Just because. Anyway, if you want to get in touch with me, there are several ways to do so. First and foremost is the Facebook group, which is facebook.com/baseballbeerpod. Twitter is the same thing. Twitter handle is @baseballbeerpod. If you ever want to send me an email, the best way to get in touch with me is baseballbeerpodcast@gmail.com. And finally, if you want to get to the website where I post the podcasts before they're out on iTunes and Stitcher, it is baseballandbeerpodcast.blogspot.com. Again, you can subscribe to me and the podcast on both iTunes and Stitcher.
Beer is good, beer is good, beer is good, and stop.
All right, so over the last 2 weeks, I had the privilege of driving all over Connecticut and the western part of Massachusetts in search for some of the better beers out there. First stop was, again, down in Connecticut at OEC Brewery. If you remember the last podcast, I was talking about how we took a tour of that facility. Not this past Tuesday, but the previous Tuesday, they were releasing 2 brand new bottles of beer. The first one was their Phantasma Sour. I guess it was their first blend, or blend number 1, however they handle that. But that's OEC, one of OEC's many sours. This one is styled as an old German porter. It's brewed with wheat, oats, molasses, and licorice root. It's also blended. 60% of it is aged in oak barrels, and 40% is as a young ale, so just brand new beer is mixed with it, and that's how they create this Phantasma Sour. I haven't opened my bottle yet. Well, actually, I got 3 of this one and 3 of the other one that I'm going to go into. Haven't had any of them yet. I did have a sample of this when I was there, and it tasted solid. A typical OEC type beer. Really nothing to say except for it's good, and it's a very drinkable sour. I don't know when I'll be opening the bottle, but when the time is right. It's a sour, so it ages very, very well. There's no wrong time to have it. There's no period of time in which it tastes best. Just whenever I feel like opening the damn thing, I can, and enjoy quality beer. The other beer that they had up for sale for everyone was their Fig-Tasma. Figtasma. It is kind of pretty much what it sounds like. It's a version of the Phantasma, just spelt Fig-Tasma. It is a special edition that was blended from Zinfandel whiskey, Pinot Noir, and Pedro Jimenez sherry barrels for a year. So try saying that again. I'm going to see if I can actually hit the words this time. It was blended from a Zinfandel barrel, whiskey/Pinot Noir barrel, and Pedro Jimenez sherry barrels for a year. And then it was double matured with figs from OEC's orchards, which I can say exists. They did take us around there. Also in a former Burgundy barrel from the Dashi Cellars in Sonoma, California. All right, so the best part about all that was when we got to OEC, there was very minimal line there. There was probably about 10 people in front of us. So thankfully and then the guy who's running the bar selling everything to us decided to start selling early. They were supposed to start at 4, but he actually started selling to us maybe about quarter of. So everything seemed to work out. We got in there, got the beer that we wanted. We were able to sit down, enjoy a flight or two. I had a pint. We were on our way. And I only mentioned the line specifically for a reason, and I'll get to that in a couple of seconds. On my way home from OEC, I was reminded that as it was a Wednesday, remember we got the beers on Tuesday, stayed at Tom's place Tuesday night, went home Wednesday. Wednesday, I was reminded that Treehouse was opening and they were going to be selling some cans of Julius, and amongst other things. So Treehouse is on the way home for me from Connecticut, so I figured why not make the stop in and pick up some quality beer. And as I mentioned just a couple of seconds ago, where there was a very minimal line for OEC, it was the exact opposite for Treehouse. So pretty sure by now you've all heard the story of the Wednesday before Thanksgiving Treehouse line, but let me give you perspective from where I was. I got there at noon, give or take a minute, but I got there at noon. Traditionally, on Wednesdays they do open at noon for canned sales, but day before Thanksgiving was a little bit special. They were selling growlers, which I wasn't aware of, and they pushed back the opening time from noon to 2. It was on their website, but to be fair to them, I just overlooked it. That's neither here nor there. So by the time I got in line, there was probably about 75 to 100 tops people there. And I got in line, and people were still immediately behind me, forming the line behind me. Started to, the line, I was the pivot point to where the line started to turn and head up their driveway towards the road. If you're not familiar with Treehouse Brewery, you pull into their driveway. It's a small hill dirt road, and it kind of loops back up to the warehouse where you buy the beer. It's kind of, I guess, shaped like a J. It's probably the best way to explain it. I was, and the facility is at the top of the hook, I guess is the best place on the J. Anyway, I was the beginning of that curve where the straight line starts. I don't know why I'm explaining how a letter is designed, but and people were still arriving constantly. The line was ever expanding as I was just sitting there. And once I got there, that's when I realized that they weren't opening until 2. So I was sitting around by myself. Thankfully, it wasn't cold. I had my hoodie on, and I felt comfortable. It wasn't a pain. It was very sunny. The heat helped, or the sun out there helped, but still sitting around for an hour and a half just wasn't a blast. But again, like OEC, they did open a little bit early due to the fact that there was a humongous line. They passed out the tickets for the growlers. I decided to get a small 750 ml growler of beer. Got a 750 milliliter growler of Bear beer, which is their brown ale. And they were also selling cans of Julius, cans of Green, cans of Haze, cans of Single Shot, and I think there was one more, but it wasn't anything I really cared about. Even though Green and Haze aren't my wheelhouse, I decided to get a couple of those cans just because maybe I would like them. Who knows? And we all know Julius. Julius is one of my favorites, and Single Shot is their coffee milk stout. So it was a very good haul altogether, and I've already finished the growler of Bear. It's a very great brown ale. It's very malty and caramelly, and if you like brown ales, that's certainly one to try. Obviously, I've had a couple Julius's, a couple of Single Shots. Those are both awesome. Tried the Haze. Haze isn't as bad as I thought it would be. I will probably have my other can of that. Green, however, it's too piney for me. I'm starting to come around to the hop taste altogether, but the pine's still not my thing. So it's still, I could see why everyone loves it. I see why everyone, IPA fans like it more than Julius, but Julius is still my go-to when it comes to IPAs. Oh, let's go back to the line real quick. After I got With Treehouse, before they open the doors, they give you a ticket for growlers. You write on the ticket what you want on your growler, you hand it in, and so you could go buy your cans, pack up, and get back to the brewery in order to grab your growler and be on your way. They're two separate areas, so there's no grouping in the middle and causing traffic jams. Gave my ticket, got my cans, and while I was walking back, the line had extended all the way to the road. I can't even give you a rough estimate as to what that number is, but that's a lot of people. That's all it was. It was just a lot of people. It was insane seeing so many people in line for beers that they probably weren't going to get. We're running out of cases of single shot, and I don't know how much they had of everything else, but I think everyone was going to get Green and Julius, just judging by what I saw in the brewery. And they were canning the haze as I was buying the cans, so I'm pretty sure with those three they were set, but there were going to be a lot of disappointed people who weren't getting single shot. But that's neither here nor there. By the time I left, the line was way past down the road. They were actually crowding the parking lot, so it was tough for me to get out, but I did, and I made it home, and now here we are, and I'm still enjoying the beer that I got. So that's my story. Sticking to it.
Another block kick. Everybody blames me, but it was the left guard who didn't pick up his man. Why can't they see?
So the biggest news so far, or over the last 2 weeks in the NFL, is that we are down to one undefeated team. Remember, a couple weeks ago, it was between Carolina Panthers and the New England Patriots, and based upon my previous episodes, I can imagine if you've been in a coma and don't know the answer already, kind of think that it would be the Patriots who are still undefeated and that the Panthers are the one who lost. That's not correct. This past Sunday, in the Sunday night game broadcast in front of millions and millions of people, the Denver Broncos, led by Brock Osweiler, went ahead and decided to end the Patriots' undefeated season at 10-1. It went back and forth throughout, not even through most of the game. It was after I went to sleep, so it was, the fourth quarter mostly. Kind of went back and forth. There was, quote unquote, supposedly a couple of bad ref calls, and, I haven't seen it, I haven't watched it. But, just going by the general gist of everything, no, they're not lying. The plays were badly called, and that eventually led to, instead of another Tom Brady fourth quarter comeback from behind win, turned into a game-tying field goal in which the Broncos decided to run a 40-plus yard touchdown to end it. So, and along with that is the Patriots' undefeated season. It's really, there's not a whole lot to say, really. I mean, from my perspective, refs make bad calls all the time. The Raiders have had 15 years of terrible play, but also not all of it's their fault. There are a couple of games that the ref gave to the other team, took away from Oakland and gave it to the other team because of shitty calls. Part of the game, if I were in a position where a bad ref call made me so upset that my team is 10-1 instead of 11-0, I would probably take a step back and reevaluate where I am, because 10-1 is still fucking awesome. They're still making the playoffs, even with all the injuries, even with Gronkowski missing at least a game. Doubtful anymore, but they're still the best team. They take this and they use it as fuel. So if you're down on the Patriots, don't be. They're still going to at least the Super Bowl. Whether or not they win, it's a different story, but I still like their odds. As for the Raiders, they went 1-1 since we last spoke. This win coming this past weekend against Tennessee, in hopefully what is things to come, as Derek Carr led the Raiders offense to a game-winning touchdown in the fourth quarter after previously giving up a fumble that led to the Titans taking the lead in the fourth quarter. So that is showing a lot of poise and leadership by our quarterback of the future. I've been saying it since the beginning of the season. Derek Carr is looking awesome. Didn't have full confidence in him last year. He was looking okay, nothing spectacular, but he, like I said, he has a lot of poise. He's showing a lot of leadership. He feels confident in his offense this year as opposed to last year where he had pretty much garbage. Amari Cooper is looking good. He is making some drops that can't be done if they want to be a playoff team, but other than that, he's constantly getting 100 yards or near 100-yard games. Michael Crabtree has been a fantastic signing. Tavius Murray not the best running back in the league, but he doesn't need to be. He's at least making the defense honest. Things are looking good. There still needs to be some help in the defense, like I've said millions of times before, and it didn't change things. Even though the game ended on a last-second interception, secondary still needs a lot of shoring up. They need a secondary that can actually defend and not have to worry about the offense doing their part, because otherwise we're going to get a lot of shootouts and things are not always going to end up the way they did against the Titans. From here, we're going on to the tough part of the schedule. Raiders are going against the Chiefs. Actually, the rest of the season, it's 2 games against the Chiefs, 1 game against Denver, 1 game against San Diego, and 1 game against Green Bay. So it's not going to be easy to make the playoffs. At this point, I don't want to say I don't care if they make the playoffs or not, but I'm not going to be worried I'm not going to be upset if they don't. I guess it's probably the best way to put it. My sights are set for next year, and next year I'm going all in.
Single, double, triple, home run. For the celebration, I'll shoot my gun.
All right, so baseball's hot stove season has officially begun. Yesterday, David Price agreed to a deal with the Boston Red Sox, so he's coming up here to Boston. He's being local to me, so maybe catch a couple more games with him pitching. The deal is really nothing to shake a stick at. It's 7 years, which you can argue is reasonable, even though I think he's 30 years old, so by the time the contract ends, he's 37, minus the actual opt-out clause, which I believe is year 3 or 4. But that's not the fun part. The fun part is the total amount of the deal is $217 million. Again, that's over 7 years. So if you do the math, he's getting paid roughly $30.1 million per year, or $31 million per year. That's pretty crazy. When Kershaw, signed his deal with the Dodgers, figured that was going to be the biggest deal for a while. Yet here we are. David Price, now the highest paid pitcher in baseball, coming over to Boston after a forgettable year for the Red Sox. Offensively struggling, a couple of bright spots, but pitching was their worst. They didn't have a big number 1 starter. Decided to fork over the cash and get one, and now they are looking pretty good. Toronto is going to have a run for its money, and it's still only the beginning of the hot stove, so there's a lot more moves to be made. Questions will be answered, like, will Toronto respond? Probably not going to be able to afford anyone big like a Greinke or anything like that. Maybe they can go for Samardzija, but you never know. White Sox, they are using the hot stove wisely. As their only big signing so far has been Alex Avila, catcher for the Detroit Tigers, now catcher for the Chicago White Sox. He will probably be backing up Tyler Flowers, or kind of do what they did last year with Soto and kind of do a 60-40 split rather than your traditional 80-20 split that most teams do with their catchers. Flowers is not great. He's not as awful as people like to say he is. So getting someone like Alex Avila, who's very solid defensively and very solid offensively, not spectacular or anything, is a good start. They really need to focus on the middle infield at this point. Get another couple bats, and maybe we'll be looking at an okay season. A lot of people are talking about trading Quintana or Sale. If some team is dumb enough to give up their, everything they have for Chris Sale or Quintana, then by all means do it, but I'm just not. I wouldn't aggressively be shopping them because they're two great pitchers, two great left-handed pitchers. And I want them to pitch for the White Sox, but I also want the White Sox to win first and foremost. So if they are able to win quickly by getting rid of Chris Sale or Jose Quintana, then by all means. I just don't think it's going to be possible. And that does it for episode number 29 of the Baseball and Beer podcast. If you ever want to get in touch with me, there are the following ways to do so. If you have Facebook, you can certainly join the Facebook group at facebook.com/baseballbeerpod. Twitter handle is the same as that, at baseballbeerpod. If you want to send me an email, baseballbeerpodcast@gmail.com. You could subscribe to this podcast via iTunes or Stitcher, or even both. But if you want to go to the website to get to the podcast first and foremost, it is baseballandbeerpodcast.blogspot.com. Again, I want to thank everyone for listening in. This was episode 29 of the Baseball and Beer Podcast. My name again is Brendan Bowes, and I hope everyone has a fantastic week.
Are you excited?
I'm so excited.
Awesome.
I do not like Julia Roberts movies.